It's Saturday, May 23rd. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the Blanco Lirio channel, and today we're going to do a follow-on video to the tragic loss of Pakistan International Airlines Flight 8303 yesterday in Pakistan. We don't know quite yet how the aircraft ended up striking both engines on the runway. The cockpit voice recorder and the data recorder have been recovered, so investigators should be able to put that piece of the puzzle together soon. And today we're going to spend some time looking more closely at the accessory gearbox drive of the CFM 56-5 series of engines and show you what investigators are going to be looking at when they investigate these engines as to why they failed. Thanks again for all the comments on the previous video and keeping your comments civil, and the outpouring of condolences to everybody that has been tragically affected by this accident. Now, we don't know how the aircraft struck the runway, as opposed to just simply forgetting to put down the gear, which would be highly unlikely. First off, forgetting to put the gear down is virtually unheard of in the airline industry, but it's very common in light aircraft. And it's also fairly common in light aircraft for people to go around after they've forgotten to put the gear down, even going around after they've hit the propellers on their small aircraft. In the airlines, though, this is very rare. However, recently in 2016, Emirates had a disaster in a Boeing 777, Emirates Flight 521 in August of 2016, with a botched go-around. Actually, it was a botched touch and go. The aircraft had already touched down, and then they decided to go around, and things got very sideways on them. This is a very rarely practiced maneuver in the simulators for the airlines, but it is becoming more prevalent of a maneuver to practice in the airlines as a result of that accident. This may have very well been a similar situation, though we won't know until we get the flight data recorder. And the situation is, if you decide to go around after you've touched down, everything has to be done correctly. And if you prematurely retract the landing gear, or the engine spool up time is slow, there's a good chance that you may, if you improperly do the touch and go procedure, may briefly touch back down on the runway. And all it takes is a quick tap on the engines to cause a lot of damage. So let's go inside and take a closer look at the accessory drive gearbox assembly on the CFM 56-5 series of engines. First, let's take a look and see what an engine strike on a runway looks like and how quick this can occur. This is a Boeing 747 Polar Air Los Angeles poor piloting technique in a crosswind situation, tagging the number 4 engine. Excessive control inputs on short final, dealing with a crosswind. Watch the number 4 engine on the right wing. Bam, that's all it took, and a big bounce. The CFM 56 engine is designed by both General Electric and Safran Engineering. So let's take a closer look at this accessory drive gearbox. Here's the general location of the accessory drive gearbox, and it's driven by this shaft right here, the radial drive shaft, spinning at about 19,000 RPM, connecting to the N2, or high-pressure turbine and high-pressure compressor section shaft. This is a well-proven design with over 850 million flight hours logged. Protecting the accessory gearbox is a thin fan cowl. The entire design needs to be very lightweight. It is not designed to be smacked onto the runway. Here's how close and low some of the accessories are located on these engines. Here is specifically the CFM 56-5 power transmission, or the transmission gearbox. They're all very similar, and they all act similar to and function similar to what your serpentine belt does in your car. It's a one unit that drives all these critical accessories, including the fuel pump, generators, oil pump, and starter. Here's a closer view of the accessory gearbox. Now, this is not clocked in the correct position on the engine, but you can see here the radial drive shaft, again spinning at about 19,000 RPM, coming off of the N2 shaft of the engine, going through a 90-degree gearbox here, and then into the accessory drive gearbox. And this accessory gearbox is bolted with two very large bolts right here at either end onto the engine, plus additional mounting here and here. So here on the left lower side of the engine is shown where the accessory gearbox drive, or the accessory gearbox, is mounted. Again, in here you can see the drive shaft connected to the N2 or high pressure shaft, high pressure turbine and high pressure compressor section, easy for me to say, as opposed to the N1 shaft, which is inside of the N2 shaft, and that connects the low pressure compressor section and the low pressure turbine section. Here's a computer view, simplified view, the drive shaft coming off of the N2, and this is the approximate correct location of the entire gearbox assembly. So if you hit this thing hard enough onto the ground, you potentially could shear this bolt and either wreck some or all of these accessories mounted to the accessory gearbox. Or if you could shear or break this radial drive shaft, then all the accessories associated with this gearbox would become inop. Here's a view of the radial drive shaft coming off of the N2. And again, another view. Here's another view of exactly where the accessory gearbox is mounted on the engine and the different mounting flanges and the different accessories associated with the accessory gearbox, including fuel pump, lubrication unit, drive pad, alternator drive pad, speed sensor, starter drive pad, hydraulic pump, IDG drive. All of this is driven off of that single shaft and rotating at a high rate of speed, up to 19,418 RPM for the radial drive shaft. This is courtesy of Aviation Stack Exchange. So with this picture taken by the Pakistani plane spotters showing both engines damaged and the rat deployed, this indicates a lot of different things. First off, the aircraft is remaining airborne. It has the electrics and the hydraulics needed to fly the Airbus, operate the flight controls, because the ram air turbine is providing emergency hydraulic power to the flight controls, separate from the accessory drive gearbox. It's also providing emergency electrical generator power, separate from the accessory drive gearbox, to keep the aircraft electrically and hydraulically operating. However, if those accessory drive gearboxes are damaged or certain critical functions of those gearboxes are damaged, the engines are on their way to failure. From this view, we can see damage to both engines, the bottoms. It's hard to see if there was any damage done to the bottom of the fuselage, which indicates to me that this may very well have been a case of the aircraft settling back down on the runway while doing a go-around. Now let's take a closer look at that engine damage to see that, indeed, that does appear to be enough damage to have hit some of the accessories on the accessory drive gearbox. So this is just some of the things investigators will be looking at in this accident investigation. The data, flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder, I believe, have been recovered. This will help tremendously in piecing the pieces of this puzzle back together. Thanks again so much for your support of this channel, and particularly to all my patrons over on Patreon, as this content has been demonetized by YouTube. Thank you for your support. See you here.